Syncretism in the West, Pico's 900 Theses. Prefatory Note Farmer's Edition is the definitive modern critical edition of Giovani Pico della Mirandola's Conclusiones non genti, the 900 Theses Pico proposed to defend publicly in Rome, January 1487, before Pope Innocent VIII condemned 13 of them, forcing the young philosopher to write his Apologia and flee to France. The volume includes facing-page Latin-English text, extensive commentary, and a full scholarly apparatus. What follows is a section-by-section critical review. Part 1. Introduction, Pico's Life and the Roman Project. Farmer opens with a concise but substantive intellectual biography of Giovani Pico della Mirandola, 1463 to 1494. Key strengths here: he situates Pico within the Florentine Neoplatonist circle around Marsilio Ficino without reducing him to it. Pico's independence from Ficino is flagged early and important. He explains the audacity of the project. Pico was 23 years old, spent his own fortune printing 900 theses, invited scholars from across Europe to Rome, and planned to deliver the Oration on the Dignity of Man as a prefatory address, a document not originally a standalone essay, but a preludium to a disputation. The papal condemnation process is reconstructed carefully. Of 900 theses, the papal commission flagged 13 as heretical or suspect. Pico defended them in the Apologia, 1487, and Innocent VIII condemned the entire Apologia as well. Critical assessment. This section is excellent as a gateway, but deliberately non-exhaustive on biography, directing readers to Guerin and Wierzbowski for depth, suitable as a teaching introduction. Section 2. The concept of syncretism and Philosophia Perennis. This is one of the most important theoretical sections in the volume. Farmer distinguishes several related but non-identical concepts: term, meaning, and context. Syncretism. Deliberate fusion of divergent philosophical religious traditions into a coherent whole. Philosophia Perennis. The notion, later coined by Leibniz, of a perennial wisdom running through all traditions. Concordia, Pico's own preferred term, the harmony he sought between Plato and Aristotle, scholasticism and Kabbalah. Prisca Theologia, ancient theology, recovered through Hermes, Orpheus, Pythagoras, Plato. Farmer argues persuasively that Pico's project is structurally syncretistic in method, even where it avoids doctrinal fusion. The 900 theses are organized so that tensions between systems are retained and mapped, not dissolved, an epistemological sophistication often missed by scholars who read Pico as naively harmonizing. Critical assessment. The distinction between Pico's Concordia and later Irenic syncretism is subtle and significant for theological readers. He could have gone further on Pico's debt to the Florentine Council debates, 1438 to 39, on Greek-Latin church union as a proximate intellectual context for Concordist thought. Section 3. Sources and the architecture of the 900 Theses. Farmer provides a taxonomy of Pico's 900 sources, which is invaluable. Conclusiones secundum alios, conclusions according to others, i.e., reporting others' views. 828 Theses. Scholastic tradition, Albert the Great, Thomas Aquinas, Duns Scotus, Henry of Ghent, Giles of Rome, and others. Greek philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, Plotinus, Porphyry, Iamblichus, Proclus, Themistius. Arabic tradition, Averroes, Avicenna, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, Jewish Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Zohar, Kabbalistic commentaries. Pico is the first Christian thinker to systematically integrate Kabbalah into Latin scholastic disputation. Hermetic, Orphic, Chaldean, Corpus Hermeticum via Ficino's translation. Orphic hymns, Chaldean oracles. Pythagorean tradition. Conclusiones, secundum opinionem propriam. Pico's own conclusions. 72 theses. These are subdivided by Pico into mathematical, magical, Kabbalistic, Orphic, and general philosophical subgroups. Critical assessment. Farmer's source analysis is meticulously documented. He demonstrates that Pico was not merely reporting others' views in the Secundum Alios theses, but strategically selecting and reframing them to create implicit dialogues across traditions. This argument is among the book's most original scholarly contributions. Paragraph 4. Editorial method and the Latin text. Farmer used 3 early printed editions, Rome 1486, Bologna K 1496, Reggio 1506, alongside manuscript evidence to establish the critical text. He discusses textual variants and their significance, Pico's deliberate obscurity. Many theses were intentionally lapidary, encoded for disputants rather than general readers. The challenge of translating theses that are scholastic shorthand. Thesis references to quidditas, hecacitas, esse versus essentia distinctions that require substantial unpacking. Critical assessment. The Latin text is clean and reliable. The translation choices are defensible but occasionally overly literal, which Farmer defends on the grounds that philosophical precision demands it. For teaching purposes, the literalism is actually a virtue. Part 2. Text and Translation. Facing page Latin-English. Division A. Conclusione Secundum Alios. Scholastic Traditions. Theses 1 to 400. Albertist, Thomist, Scottist, and secondary scholastics. These theses represent Pico's engagement with 13th to 14th century Latin scholasticism. Key observations. Thomist block, most extensive scholastic section. Pico accurately reports core Thomist positions on esse and essentia, the analogy of being, intellect and will, and the beatific vision. But he juxtaposes Thomist theses with Scotist counterparts structurally, forcing the reader to see the debates as live rather than settled. Several theses touch on Thomist Augustinian tensions regarding illumination and knowledge of God. Scotist block. Pico gives Duns Scotus equal weight with Aquinas, a signal of his refusal to privilege the Dominican tradition as the orthodox scholasticism. The univocity of being, Scotus's doctrine, is presented alongside Thomist analogy without editorial resolution, a deliberate irresolution that Farmer reads as methodologically significant. Critical assessment. For biblical scholars, this section is relevant for understanding the late medieval background to Reformation debates on divine knowledge, predestination, and grace. Farmer's commentary here is consistently good on tracing the scholastic chains of argument. Division B, Conclusione Secundum Alios, Greek Philosophical Traditions, Theses 400 to 600, Platonic, Neoplatonic, and Aristotelian Theses. This is intellectually the richest section for Renaissance studies. Platonic, Neoplatonic block. Pico draws primarily on Plotinus's Enneads via Ficino's Latin, Proclus's Elementatio Theologica, and Iamblichus's De Mysteriis. The theses on the One, intellect, nous, and soul, a Neoplatonic triad, are reported with exceptional precision. Pico's Proclus theses are particularly significant. He is one of the first Latin thinkers to take Proclus seriously as a philosophical system, rather than merely a mystical curiosity. Aristotelian block, reported alongside Platonist theses to stage the Plato-Aristotle harmony, De Ente et Uno, 1491, was Pico's later extended treatment. Theses on form, matter, potency act, and the unmoved mover are faithfully reproduced. Critical assessment. Farmer's commentary on the Neoplatonic theses is outstanding. He traces each claim back to specific passages in Plotinus, Proclus, and Iamblichus. For educators dealing with patristic and medieval appropriations of Neoplatonism, this section offers excellent documentation of the Philosophia Perennis machinery. Division C, Conclusione Secundum Alios, Arabic Philosophical Traditions, Theses 600 to 700. Averroes, Avicenna block. The Averroist theses on intellect, the unity of the agent intellect, its separability from individual souls, are accurately reported. Pico includes Averroist positions condemned at Paris, 1277, without editorial distancing, a bold move that contributed to the Papal Commission's concerns. Avicennian theses on the floating man, the necessary existent, and emanationist cosmology round out this section. Critical assessment. Farmer does important work here, showing that Pico's inclusion of Arabic philosophy was not decorative, but structural. Arabic falsafa mediated the Greek Neoplatonic legacy into Latin scholasticism, and Pico recognized this transmission chain consciously. Division D. Conclusione Secundunalios, Jewish Kabbalah, Averroist 700 to 800. This section is historically transformative, and Farmer's commentary is at its best here. Key Kabbalistic clusters, Kabbalistic theme theses, content, Sephirot, divine emanations. Pico maps the 10 Sephirot onto Neoplatonic hypostases. Ein Sof, infinite divine, correlated with the Neoplatonic one beyond being. Trinitarian correlations. Pico controversially maps Kabbalistic triads onto Christian Trinity. Angelic hierarchies. Merkava traditions integrated with pseudo-Dionysian hierarchies. Letter number speculation. Gematria, notary con. Mathematical mysticism linked to Pythagorean number theory. Jesus as Kabbalistic fulfillment. The most controversial cluster. Pico argues Kabbalah proves Christian doctrine. The Christian Kabbalah thesis cluster is historically foundational. Pico virtually invents Christian Kabbalism as a discipline here, a tradition later taken up by Johann Reuchlin, Johannes Pistorius, and eventually influencing 16th-17th century Christian Hebraism. Critical assessment. Farmer's commentary is exceptionally detailed on sources, drawing on Gershom Scholem, Moshe Yidel, and Chaim Wershubsky, whose posthumous Pico della Mirandola's encounter with Jewish mysticism is essential companion reading. One limitation. Farmer occasionally translates Kabbalistic terminology in ways that slightly favor Neoplatonic equivalence over the Hebrew original's semantic range. Division E. Conclusiones Secundamalios, Orphic, Chaldean, and Hermetic traditions. Theses 800 to 828. Orphic hymns block. Pico interprets the Orphic hymns allegorically, following the Neoplatonic tradition of reading cosmogonic myth as philosophical theology. The succession of divine principles, night, heaven, Chronos, Zeus, is rationalized into a Neoplatonic emanation scheme. Chaldean oracles, the Oracula Chaldaica, pseudo-Zoroastrian oracular texts, are treated as ancient wisdom parallel to Hebrew prophecy. Key themes. Fire theology, the divine triad of Father, power, intellect, and theurgic assent. Hermetic theses, the Corpus Hermeticum, translated by Ficino, 1463, provides theses on the divine mind, the human microcosm, and cosmic sympathy. Pico aligns Hermetic theology with Neoplatonic and Kabbalistic parallel structures. Critical assessment. This section exemplifies Pico's syncretistic method most clearly. A same structural doctrine, divine unity, emanation, return, appears in Greek, Chaldean, and Egyptian form. Farmer's commentary is good, but occasionally less deep than on the scholastic and Kabbalistic sections, reflecting the state of scholarship in the 1990s. Subsequent work by Wouter Hanegraaff and Brian Copenhaver has extended this area considerably. Part 3. Pico's own conclusions. Secundum Opinionum Proprium. 72 theses. These are the most philosophically explosive theses in the collection, and the core of Pico's original contribution. Pico's magical and mathematical theses, key cluster. Pico distinguishes natural magic, magia naturalis, from demonic magic. Natural magic operates through the sympathies and antipathies of the natural world, aligning with Neoplatonic cosmic sympathy. It is positioned as the practical completion of natural philosophy, not superstition, connected to Pythagorean number theory as the mathematical structure underlying magical operations. Critical assessment. Farmer's commentary here is essential for understanding why the Papal Commission flagged these theses. the claim that no science certifies Christ's divinity more than magic and Kabbalah. Thesis 9.1 Propria was among the condemned claims. Farmer traces the logical structure of this argument carefully. Pico's Kabbalistic Theses Propria. The 47 original Kabbalistic theses are Pico's most innovative contribution. He claims direct Christian theological proofs from Kabbalistic letter speculation. The Tetragrammaton, YHWH, is read Christologically. Gematria calculations yield Trinitarian and Christological results. The Messiah's suffering is presented as deducible from Kabbalistic numerology. Critical assessment. These theses are the founding document of Christian Kabbalism. Farmer's commentary is meticulous and balanced. He neither dismisses the project as mere apologetic manipulation, nor romanticizes it as genuine interfaith dialogue. The hermeneutical question of whether Pico is using Kabbalah or engaging it remains productively unresolved in his commentary. Pico's Orphic and general philosophical theses, Orphic Theses Propria. Pico claims Orpheus teaches monotheism encoded in polytheistic myth. The divine names are interpreted as attributes of a single principle. Connected to his general thesis that all ancient theology teaches the same truth in different symbolic registers. On the intellect's return to the One, the Neoplatonic Epistrophe. On human dignity as the capacity to assume any form, the philosophical underpinning of the oration. On the reconciliation of Plato and Aristotle, a preview of De Ente et Uno, Part 4, Commentary. Farmer's commentary is organized thesis by thesis, with varying depth depending on complexity. Structural features. Strengths of the commentary. 1. Source identification. Farmer traces nearly every thesis to specific textual loci, a massive philological achievement. 2. Cross-referencing. The commentary systematically maps structural parallels across traditions, e.g., showing when a Thomist and a Platinian thesis assert structurally identical propositions in different vocabularies. 3. Condemnation analysis. Special attention to the 13 condemned theses with reconstruction of the Papal Commission's likely reasoning. Contextual depth on Kabbalah. The Kabbalistic commentary benefits enormously from Farmer's use of Wershipsky's unpublished research. 5. Anti-reductionism. Farmer consistently resists reducing Pico to any single intellectual lineage. Limitations of the commentary. 1. Uneven depth. Scholastic sections receive less penetrating commentary than Kabbalistic or Hermetic sections, reflecting Farmer's stronger background in the latter. 2. 1998 datedness. Work since then by Moshe Edel, Kabbalah and Eros, 2005, Brian Copenhaver, Magic and the Dignity of Man, 2019, and Dennis Robichaud has extended or revised some of Farmer's positions. 3. Limited theological engagement. The commentary is primarily historicist. Readers seeking normative theological assessment of Pico's syntheses will need to supplement with Hampus Litkins or Michael Allen. 4. Index limitations. The index of proper names is adequate, but the thematic index is insufficiently granular for research use. Part 5. Appendices, Bibliography, and Indices. Appendix, the 13 condemned theses. Farmer provides a critical apparatus for the condemned theses, including the original Latin with Farmer's translation, the Papal Commission's objections reconstructed from documentary evidence, Pico's own defense in the Apologia, cross-referenced, Farmer's assessment of the condemnation's theological rationale. Critical assessment. This appendix is essential for understanding the Pico affair. The condemned theses include claims about purgatory, magical practice, Christological Kabbalism, and the limits of papal authority, a revealing window into late 15th century orthodoxy's boundaries. Bibliography, comprehensive for 1998, notable for its inclusion of Hebrew and Aramaic sources on Kabbalah, with Wershipsky's guidance. The full range of Renaissance Platonism scholarship. Patristic and Medieval Scholastic Source Literature, GAP, naturally lacks post-1998 scholarship. Users should supplement with the bibliography in Copenhaver's Magic and the Dignity of Man, 2019, as the most current guide to the field. Overall critical assessment, scholarly significance criterion assessment, textual reliability, 5 stars, best critical edition available. Translation quality, 3-star scale, precise, occasionally stiff. Commentary depth, excellent on Kabbalah Hermetica, uneven on scholasticism. Theoretical framing, 5 stars. The syncretism analysis is genuinely original. Pedagogical utility, 3-star scale, excellent for graduate teaching, demanding for undergraduates. Current relevance, foundational, read alongside Copenhaver 2019. For biblical theological studies, specific points of engagement. 1. Christian Kabbalah as hermeneutical method. Pico's Kabbalistic theses are the origin point for a tradition of Old Testament Christological reading via Jewish mysticism, relevant for understanding Renaissance and Reformation exegesis. The Prisca Theologia problem. Pico's assumption that Hebrew, Greek, and Egyptian wisdom share a common root raises perennial questions about the relationship of biblical revelation to general religious knowledge. Cf. Justin Martyr's Logos Spermaticos. 3. The Oration on the Dignity of Man, not in this volume, but inseparable from it. Pico's Theological Anthropology, humans as beings of no fixed nature, who can ascend or descend, has direct implications for Imago Dei theology. 4. Magic and Miracle. The magical theses raise questions about the boundary between theurgic practice and sacramental theology that recur in Reformation-era debates. 5. Syncretism as theological danger. The condemned theses illustrate the magisterial concern that philosophical harmonization can erode the particularity of Christian revelation. Attention alive in contemporary interfaith theology. Essential companion volumes. Author, title, relevance. Wierzchowski, Chaim Pico della Mirandola's Encounter with Jewish Mysticism, 1989. Indispensable on Kabbalistic sources. Copenhaver Brian, Magic and the Dignity of Man, 2019. Updates farmers substantially. Garin, Eugenio Giovani Pico della Mirandola, 1937, IT, Foundational Biography. Edel Moshe, Kabbalah, New Perspectives, 1988, Context for Kabbalistic Traditions. Pico used Alan Michael J.B., Synoptic Art. Marsilio Ficino, On the History of Platonic Interpretation, Ficino-Pico Relation. Hanegraaff, Walter, Esotericism and the Academy, 2012. Broader Context of Western Esotericism. Craven, William, Giovani Pico della Mirandola, Symbol of His Age, 1981. Good on Theological Reception. Summary verdict. Farmer's Syncretism in the West remains the indispensable scholarly edition of Pico's 900 Theses, a monument of Renaissance philology. Its greatest contribution is not the translation, accurate but functional, but the theoretical reframing of Pico as a systematic syncretist, whose method anticipated later comparative philosophy, and the Kabbalistic commentary that finally made the theses' Jewish intellectual sources legible to non-specialists. Its limitations are the uneven commentary depth and natural datedness. No serious student of Renaissance thought, Christian Kabbalism, or the history of Western esotericism can work without it. But it should be read alongside Copenhaver's 2019 reassessment for a complete picture of current scholarship.
Hi, this is Mike Koplitz from Followers of the Way Ministry. I hope you enjoyed this video. There is a tremendous amount of other material on the Followers of the Way website. You can find all kinds of no-cost material, research papers, videos, church graphics, educational videos. And I hope you take an opportunity to come visit. God bless. Amen.